At 80 years old, Michael Douglas is looking back at his life with a level of honesty he never allowed himself before. For many years, he stayed quiet about the most painful parts of his marriage, not because there was nothing to say, but because some truths felt too heavy to speak out loud. To the world, his relationship with Catherine Zeta-Jones looked like a dream. They were beautiful, rich, famous, and admired everywhere they went. Cameras followed them on red carpets. Magazines praised their love story, and people often called them one of Hollywood's most powerful couples. But behind closed doors, away from the lights and applause, their marriage carried deep emotional weight that very few people ever noticed. Michael now admits that while the world saw perfection, he was quietly struggling with fear, insecurity, and the pressure of loving a woman who seemed to shine brighter with every passing year, while he felt time slowly catching up to him. Michael Douglas's story with Catherine Zeta-Jones began in 1998, during a moment in his life when he was already trying to change who he was. He was 54 years old, recovering from back surgery and attempting to leave behind unhealthy habits that had controlled him for years. Fame had brought him success, but it had also brought addiction, stress, and a constant feeling that something was missing. He had already gone through a painful divorce, faced public scandals, and lived under the long shadow of his legendary father, Kirk Douglas. Even though he had achieved more than most people ever would, inner peace still escaped him. One night, while watching the movie The Mask of Zorro, he saw Catherine Zeta-Jones on screen. She was 29 years old, full of energy, confidence, and hope. In that moment, Michael felt something powerful. She represented youth, possibility, and a future that still felt open. At the same time, she reminded him of everything he feared he was slowly losing. When Michael finally met Catherine, later that year at the Deauville Film Festival in France, he tried to hide his insecurity behind charm and humor. He wanted to impress her, to show confidence, even if he didn't fully feel it inside. During their first conversation, he made a bold joke, saying he would be the father of her children. To him, it was meant to be playful and unforgettable. To Catherine, it was neither. She politely dismissed him, making it clear she was not impressed by fame, confidence, or status. That moment stayed with Michael. It was the first time in years that he felt truly humbled. But instead of walking away, he became more determined. When Catherine left to film a movie in Scotland, Michael sent her roses to her hotel. That simple gesture changed everything. Catherine later said she kept the card from those flowers for over 20 years. It marked the moment she stopped seeing him as a typical Hollywood star and began seeing him as a man trying to start again. Their relationship moved quickly after that. By the end of 1999, they were engaged. In August 2000, their son Dylan was born. Just a few months later, they married at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. The wedding was filled with famous faces, expensive gowns, and worldwide attention. Catherine looked stunning, Michael looked proud, and their baby son was carried down the aisle. To everyone watching, it felt like a real-life fairy tale. But even during those joyful moments, Michael sensed something he couldn't explain. Beneath the happiness, he felt a quiet fear growing. Catherine's career was rising fast, and she seemed unstoppable. Michael, on the other hand, was becoming more aware of his age, his limits, and the years behind him. While love filled their home, so did silent questions about the future. Questions Michael didn't know how to answer. As the years passed, Catherine Zeta-Jones' career continued to grow at an incredible speed. In 2003, she won an Academy Award while pregnant with their daughter, Karis. She was at the height of her power, admired for her beauty, talent, and strength. Michael was proud of her achievements and often praised her publicly. But privately, he struggled with feelings he didn't fully understand. He was aging, feeling the effects of past addictions, surgeries, and emotional stress. While Catherine seemed to move forward with endless energy, Michael felt himself slowing down. The 25-year age gap that once felt manageable now felt heavier. He loved her deeply, but he worried about becoming a burden rather than a partner. Even during happy times, a quiet voice in his mind kept asking what would happen when time finally caught up to him. That question became impossible to ignore in 2010, when Michael received devastating news. Doctors told him he had stage 4 throat cancer. The diagnosis changed everything overnight. Suddenly, the strong man Catherine married was fighting for his life. Eating became painful, speaking was difficult, and every day felt uncertain. Chemotherapy and radiation drained his body, leaving him weak and dependent. Catherine stepped into the role of caregiver without hesitation. She stayed by his side during treatments, slept in hospital chairs, and tried to stay strong even when fear overwhelmed her. The world praised her devotion, calling her the perfect wife. But no one saw the nights she cried alone, afraid of losing her husband and terrified of raising their children without him. She carried her pain quietly, believing she had no choice but to stay strong. Michael later admitted that during his illness, his greatest fear was not death itself, but the thought of leaving Catherine alone with their children. He knew how much she was sacrificing, and guilt weighed heavily on him. Catherine, meanwhile, pushed her own emotions aside. She didn't allow herself to fall apart because Michael needed her. The pressure to be strong, hopeful, and supportive every single day slowly drained her. By the time Michael entered remission in early 2011, the world celebrated his recovery as a miracle. But Catherine's body and mind could no longer carry the weight she had been holding. Months later, she entered treatment for bipolar II disorder. For the first time, the public saw a crack in the perfect image they had believed for years. Michael later reflected on this period with deep sadness. While he was grateful to be alive, he realized his illness had taken something from Catherine that might never fully return. Their marriage survived cancer, but it did not escape the emotional damage left behind. Trauma, fear, and exhaustion had changed them both. The love was still there, but it was no longer simple or light. By 2012, the couple quietly separated. There was no scandal, no betrayal, no dramatic ending. Instead, there was exhaustion and the need to breathe again. For Michael Douglas, looking back at 80 years old, the lesson is painful but clear. Love can be real, deep, and powerful, and still leave scars no one ever sees. As Michael Douglas reflects on his marriage today, he speaks not with anger, but with understanding. He no longer tries to protect the image the world once believed in. Instead, he focuses on the truth that love does not always fail because people stop caring. Sometimes, it bends under pressure that few relationships are prepared to survive. Fame, illness, age, and mental health are forces that test even the strongest bonds. Michael admits that while he and Catherine loved each other deeply, they were also human, vulnerable, and imperfect. The public saw strength, but behind the scenes, they were learning how fragile life could be. Over time, Michael and Catherine found their way back to each other, choosing commitment again with a deeper understanding of what their marriage required. Their story is not one of horror, but of reality. It shows how easily pain can hide behind smiles and how dangerous it is to believe that wealth and fame protect people from suffering. Michael Douglas's reflections serve as a reminder that every relationship carries unseen battles. At 80, he does not speak to shock the world. He speaks to tell the truth, that love is not always loud, perfect, or easy. Sometimes it is quiet, heavy, and deeply human. Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones have always been one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples. From the moment they met in 1998 at the Deauville Film Festival in France, people were fascinated by their relationship. On the surface, their marriage seemed glamorous and perfect. Red carpets, award shows, and family photos showed a couple deeply in love. But as years passed, life behind closed doors was far more complicated than what the cameras revealed. Many reports suggest that age differences, career pressures, and personal struggles created challenges that were never visible to the public eye. Michael was older by 25 years, and this age gap, which once seemed a minor detail, eventually became a source of tension. While Catherine was in her early 40s, full of ambition, creativity, and energy, Michael was in his late 60s, experiencing the natural effects of aging, as well as facing serious health challenges. Michael had survived cancer, and this experience had changed him, physically and emotionally. The energy that he once had on film sets and at public events began to fade. He sometimes struggled with fatigue, and moments of vulnerability became harder to hide. Meanwhile, Catherine was eager to continue building her career and pursue new opportunities, but she had also devoted years to supporting Michael through his health battles. This meant putting some of her dreams on hold, which created a quiet tension between them. Although both loved each other deeply, there were times when the balance between love, responsibility, and personal fulfillment felt impossible to maintain. By 2013, after nearly 13 years of marriage, this emotional strain had grown. Friends and insiders suggest that Michael and Catherine were no longer fully able to connect with each other in the way they had when they first fell in love. Their home, which once held shared joy and laughter, had become a space of quiet distance. Both were trying to heal from their own struggles, but their paths were no longer aligned. In August of that year, they separated. Unlike the dramatic breakups often seen in Hollywood tabloids, their separation was quiet, almost peaceful, a mutual acknowledgement that the relationship needed a pause. Catherine left with their children, seeking clarity, space, and a chance to rediscover parts of herself that had been overshadowed by years of caregiving and emotional sacrifice. Michael stayed in New York alone, returning to the Deauville Film Festival, the same place where they had met, reflecting on the years they had spent together. Observers noticed he looked thinner, more reflective, almost as if revisiting those memories made him confront the reality of aging and loss. Publicly, both appeared composed. Michael avoided blame in interviews, often saying, "We're working things out," a diplomatic response that masked the pain he felt privately.